I want to dive into quite a meaty topic, but it's not really as meaty as it's made out to be. We live in a world where what happened in politics has happened in sports. And by I mean happened in politics, we all know what happened, right? Somebody came up with the idea, hey, if we put people on TV and pit them in completely polar opposite sides, and oh yeah, by the way, we can do a split screen, so not only can they argue with each other, but we can see their arguments for arguing with each other. And oh yeah, by the way, in politics, we call one side the left, one side the right, and then we can put them on TV to match the left and the right. We can create arguments that don't really truly exist. It's not that there's not two sides to these discussions. Okay, that's not it. It's not that there's not a one completely polar opposite view from the other. It's just most of us don't live in those polar opposites. And so I actually know a couple of people who, I don't know if they came up with the idea, but they decided to take the idea and bring it to sports. And it works clearly, as there's a show on each network that pits guys against one another and gives them a completely different point of view and gives them the forum to share that point of view. That's where we are. That's where sports on TV is. And everybody knows it. So Lance Armstrong, and I feel like when I hear Lance Armstrong, it's like in Star Wars: A New Hope. That's a name I haven't heard in such a long time, right? Lance Armstrong posted a video on his social media stating that he was on his way to meet Caitlyn Jenner about trans athletes. Then he got bombarded with responses calling him a hypocrite, that he has no right to talk about fairness. Responding to his critics of his video, he replied with a tweet. Here's the tweet. Is there a world in which one can be supportive of the transgender community and curious about the fairness of trans athletes in a sport, yet not to be labeled a transphobe or a bigot as we ask questions? Do we yet know the answers? Do we even want to know the answers? He went on and added, have we really come to a time where a time and place where spirited debate is not only frowned upon, but feared? So let's have the discussion. Because I honestly believe, and I could be wrong, and what you have here is you have four parents. Right? I'm a dad, two girls and a boy. Ramos is a dad. He's got three kids, two boys and a daughter. Dan Byer has a young son, and Jason Stewart has a son as well. So, and different ages, different places in life. We've all lived in that. We also come from very different, I think, political backgrounds. I may be speaking out of turn, but I feel like I know where a couple of, and it's not always the same place where we come at things from. But I guess my issue is, and I totally understand, you're like, Lance Armstrong talking about fairness in sports? Really? But then you start to realize, well, no guy can talk about fairness and cheating in sports more than Lance Armstrong, who's synonymous with denying fairness and cheating in sports. Additionally, now look, there's two different types of doping that take place in the world of cycling. One is EPO. That is a medication that allows your blood to carry far more oxygen than it normally should. But there's also the use of testosterone, for lack of a better, there's other different forms. Human growth hormone, testosterone, but things that men produce in certain amounts based upon where they are in life, and women produce estrogen. So if there's ever a guy that's qualified to talk about cheating in sports, and he's come clean about it, I guess he is the guy. But what we do now is we don't actually, we're not capable of having conversations. We're just capable of shouting at each other. and walking away even more upset. So, look, I don't view this as brave in any way, but there'll be people that say it's brave by just having this discussion. I've told you I'm a radical centrist for the longest time. And this is the perfect example of where I reside that I think most of America actually resides. You know? I have zero. I have friends who are LGBTQ plus. It's not anything that I am not supportive of. I would tell you that as a parent, in terms of being transgender and having gender reassignment, I do think that's an adult decision, not a decision you should make before you're an adult. I just do. That's my feeling. But I'm actually with Lance Armstrong. I find myself like, I'm not with Lance Armstrong in terms of how he lied about his cycling career, but can't I be supportive of freedoms of gay and lesbian, transgender people and say, how are you going to compete against a biological woman? There's a reason that we drug test male and female athletes and measure their testosterone use, right? So I don't actually think it's all of that. I think this is an argument that is frankly created by politicians to be used as a weapon when elections come around. Because most of us, frankly, sit in that same spot. We're like, I'm not actually bothered by, I'm not homophobic in any way. And in terms of gender reassignment, like if you're an adult, like I can't tell you that I have, that's your body. You want to, I think that falls in line with many of my other beliefs. I would push back on if you're not an adult. And I would really push back on the idea that you compete against biological women. And even though I don't agree with on other policies that some people in Congress have promoted this, it is a fair question. Like if your sex at birth doesn't matter, why do we have women's sports then? Why do we measure the levels of testosterone in women and in men, frankly? Megan Rapinoe, Sue Bird, and Becky Sauerbrunn, three fantastic athletes in their own right, were among 40 professional Olympic and Paralympic athletes who co-signed a letter to Houston lawmakers in opposition of the Protection of Girls and Women's Sports Act. The statement says, we believe in gender equity in sports is critical, which is why we urge policymakers to turn their attention and effort to the causes of women athletes have been fighting for decades, including equal pay, the end of abuse and mistreatment, and even uneven implementation of Title IX, and a lack of access and equity for girls of colors and girls with disability, only to name a few. Our deepest hope is that transgender and intersex kids will never have to feel isolation, exclusion. Other than that, H.R. 734 is seeking to enshrine it into law, the letter reads. Well, there's a lot there to unpack. Okay? The equal pay idea, I mean, we've discussed before. Again, I think most people sit in the middle on that one. Right? Is if you're in the professional sports world, you receive whatever you're able to negotiate. That's it. Whatever you're able to negotiate, whatever you're able to leverage, that's what you will receive. And there's a percentage of the profits that you can make. And if you don't like that negotiation, by all means, hold out, lock out. You negotiated. We as the public got nothing to do with it. Of course you want the end of abuse and mistreatment. Of course. And lack of access and equity for girls of color and girls with disability. Absolutely. Who's not for that? But the problem is you're clumping all of these other issues in with something that, by the way, can limit the access, can limit the fairness, can limit a lot of different things. Because you're granting access to transgender athletes who are biological men until the time of their reassignment. I actually think that the more noise there is, it's because And the more pointing at Lance Armstrong there is, it's because there's no real substance to fall back on. Like, even in this statement, what is the real substantive argument for a biological man who goes through gender reassignment competing against women? There is no argument there. If somebody can present an argument, I'm actually somebody who's willing to listen. But the problem is that a good portion of people aren't willing to listen. They just want to shout and point out that Lance Armstrong cheated. He did. He cheated. He's been disgraced. He's lost money. He lost his marriage. He's lost any sort of credibility. He was in the conversation of the most popular athlete in the United States, and now he is one of the most hated. All of that is documented. But is he wrong? Jay Stu, is he wrong? Is he wrong in the way in which he went about this? Is his name too sullied to even be a part of this conversation?
Isn't that what the political discourse has become? I mean, take it away from sports here. Like, attacking the messenger is a great way to not answer the question. That's what politics has become too. Call someone a hypocrite, and they are excused from the conversation. As long as they're a hypocrite, they can't have valid points. Lance Armstrong just raises some very viable questions here. And I agree with your viewpoint. Who could be better qualified to talk about lack of fairness or even cheating than the world's most, I guess, famous cheater?
Yeah, the two most famous cheaters in the history of sports are Barry Bonds and Lance Armstrong. And I think, you could throw Roger Clemens, but maybe Ben Johnson in there as well, but we haven't seen or heard from him, and he's not an American athlete, right? But in American sports, I would say Barry Bonds and Lance Armstrong. Am I wrong on those two names? Would there be anybody else you would throw into that group of?
Did you say Mark McGwire? Did you?
I did not.
Okay,
I did not. That's a good one. I think Bonds' name is bigger because he's never come clean, and because he holds the single season and career home runs marks. But Mark McGwire is in that Sammy Sosa, Roger Clemens, other baseball guys but he's the only one who's come clean of them. Only one who's come clean. Ramos, how about you? Where are you when you hear this? You're a guy who you coach, as you said. If there's one thing I would do outside of what I do for work, it would be coaching girls softball. You'd love it. What do you think of the positioning of all of these arguments?
I do believe that
Ramos's mic's not working?
I turned on Jason's mic. I do believe that that the women's sports that should be for girls, for women. I don't think they should be able. I think you should be able to be a transgender person if you'd like to be, if that's what you feel. I do think there's a guideline or in being able to play into the women's sport. So that's where I would say my thought pattern lies.
Byron, you want to get in this? Or you're gonna stay out?
No, I honestly, Doug, and you said a lot there. I don't think that anything that I could say adds to it.
Okay, it's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think if me just adding on is just, I don't disagree with anything you said to that. There's not any point that I thought that you missed, and I'm with John in that.
I'm actually kind of searching for what I'm missing. You ever get to that? You're like, I'm missing something. It's like when you're pulling away from the house and you're like, I got my keys, I got my phone, okay, I got water, I'm dressed, I'm missing something, right? And I feel like with this, what am I missing? What am I missing?
I watched this documentary, and I know by saying that I watched this is a drastic political stance, I guess, that I'm taking, but I'm not political. But Matt Walsh produced this extremely provocative, popular documentary. It's called What is a Woman? And they spend a good 30 minutes on this, Doug, and I recommend you watch it, first of all. But to paraphrase what the argument that you're searching for here is, to paraphrase what the other side's argument is, is that there are not a lot of examples of transgender males dominating, humiliating females in their sports. There just aren't a lot of examples. That's what the counterpoint is. That point is overblown by the side that does not want transgender people in sports.
I would actually agree with that. There isn't. This is a very, very, very small fraction of people. And the idea is, hey, we want to protect everybody's rights, even the smallest fraction of people, which I genuinely agree with. But it's one of those, I do think that we don't have to have congressional hearings about it if we just go like, hey, we're completely accepting of if you're an adult, you want gender reassignment surgery, listen, that is your, in fact, prerogative. But hey, there's just this one thing. Right? I mean, what's the Samanya, the runner, right? Who has, forever been accused of having too much testosterone. Samana, whatever, international runner. And I mean, why? I feel like I got to be missing something here, because I can remember having conversations with my late father, because he's, from that old generation. And I would just say, listen, Dad, do you think anybody chooses to be gay? Of course not. Nobody chooses to sit down with their parents and say, listen, I don't know if you've known this or whatever, but this is my sexual preference. I don't think even if your sexual preference is the other sex, right? Those aren't conversations that most people have, let alone if you're homosexual. So I don't believe it's a choice. I do believe you're born with those feelings. I can't say that I know what it's like to be born somebody who you think you should have a different body, but I can be understanding of that. But there's a difference between, and this is a generational thing that I think, Jay, you have an old enough son. Ramos, yours are still a little bit young. Mine are, because I got two 17-year-olds and a 14-year-old son. I think they're a little bit in this. But here is the generational switch between our generation and the younger generation. And you guys tell me if I'm off. They're the generation that it's not enough to be heard. Hey, we want to be heard. We want our thoughts, our feelings to be validated. But they feel like they're only heard or validated if they're agreed with. And that's not actually hearing or validating feelings. That may be your feeling. Here's the reality, or here's the way that I'm going to go. Because this is the argument that I have in my own home, which is like, no, Dad, you're not hearing me. No, I'm hearing you. I'm just the adult. And I pay the money, I make the decisions, I'm going a different way with it. It's not that I don't hear with you. It's not that I don't think you make valid points, but I've lived longer on this earth and I've obtained the rights to make this decision. That's the decision I'm making. You're not hearing me. No, I'm not hearing. That's the difference. And I think that applies to this. Hey, I hear you on how you view it. I'm telling you the reality to it is we got to have some sort of differentiator between boys and girls sports. And what that differentiator is, I guess, is being discussed, but I don't actually think there's a lot of validity, or there hasn't been an argument made other than the feelings of people who are transgender. And that one I can't really help you with, because I deal in reality. Give me your thoughts. It really should be a conversation, not a Lance Armstrong tweets out a video and, oh, yeah, by the way, Lance Armstrong's an a-hole. All that could be true. He treated people poorly. He lied about it. He used cancer as no one would ever cheat after they had cancer. All of the worst things. All true. But, I mean, if we're talking about cheating in sports or the use of testosterone in sports, is there a better guy? I don't think so.